There's a man you've probably never heard of. But 400 years ago, he cracked a code that today's men are still blind to. He never lost a fight. He walked into 60 duels and walked out every time. Not because he was the strongest, not because he was the fastest, but because he discovered something terrifyingly true about what makes most men weak. And here's the uncomfortable part. You might be living with those same weaknesses right now. Musashi's final words weren't about glory. They were about the silent addictions that break men from the inside out. Approval, comfort, desire. Sound familiar? But that's not the most shocking part. Musashi didn't just fight other men. He fought himself. He went into the mountains, alone. No family, no friends, no distractions. And there, he faced something no one else dared to. The voice of doubt. The hunger for validation, the fear of death. And he killed them, one by one. Not with a sword, but with something far more powerful. What he discovered out there might just save your soul. Let's begin. Everyone knows the name Bruce Lee. Some have heard of Sun Tzu, but Miyamoto Musashi, most men have never even whispered his name. And yet, he might be the most powerful man you've never studied. Born in 1584, during one of the most violent times in Japan's history, Musashi wasn't raised with comfort or kindness. He was thrown into chaos. At the age of 13, he killed a grown man in a duel, not out of hatred, but because survival demanded it. By 16, his name was already whispered with fear. By 30, no one dared face him. By 60, he had never lost a fight, ever. But here's the twist no one talks about. His real power wasn't his sword. It was his mind. Musashi didn't just train his body. He trained his spirit. He studied psychology before psychology had a name. He watched the way men flinched when scared. He noticed how desire made them sloppy. He saw how fear made them freeze. And then he built a method, a brutal, solitary, relentless method, to eliminate every weakness he saw in others, from himself. You see, Musashi wasn't chasing victory. He was chasing something far more rare. Mastery. Not mastery over others, but mastery over the one enemy that never sleeps, the one that lives inside every man, the undisciplined self. And that's why his wisdom, written down in a book most have never read, has the power to rebuild men today. Because let's be honest, we're not living in a time of strong men. We're living in a time of distracted men, comfortable men, restless, reactive, approval-hungry men. Musashi saw this weakness centuries ago, and he left behind a map, not to conquer others, but to reclaim yourself. So what did he see that we don't? Let's find out. Look around. We're surrounded by machines that respond instantly to our every whim. Need a ride? Tap a screen. Feeling lonely? Scroll for a smile. Crave validation. Post, wait, and count the likes. Everything is fast. Everything is easy. And yet, why do so many men feel tired, drained, powerless? It's not that we're weak by nature. We've simply become weak by design. Because strength, true strength, doesn't grow in comfort. It's forged in resistance. Musashi understood this. He didn't have a smartphone. He didn't have 1,000 distractions or people applauding every move. He had a sword, silence, and himself. But today's man, he wakes up to noise. He spends his day chasing dopamine hits, not progress. He avoids pain like a virus. He fills his schedule but empties his soul. We've traded solitude for scrolling. We've replaced focus with notifications. We've become so overstimulated that the very idea of stillness feels unbearable. And here's the real tragedy. When you never sit in silence, you never hear your own voice. Musashi believed that every man has a core, a solid, unmoving center, but most men today can't even feel it. They're pulled in every direction, opinions, expectations, algorithms, and somewhere along the way they lose touch with who they really are. This is not about shame. This is about waking up, because powerlessness isn't permanent. It's a symptom, and symptoms reveal a deeper sickness. Musashi diagnosed it 400 years ago. And in the next chapter, he revealed the 3 addictions that make strong men weak. You ready to face them? Let's go deeper. Musashi didn't have neuroscience. He didn't have Instagram. But somehow, he saw it coming. He wrote about it in his final days. 3 silent addictions that rot a man's power from the inside out. And here's the brutal truth. Most men today are hooked. Addiction 1. Approval. Musashi called it a man's greatest surrender. The craving to be liked, to be noticed, to be seen. You post something online and wait for validation like a child waits for candy. You hide your opinions to avoid judgment. You shape your life around applause. And every time you do, you hand your self-worth to someone else. Musashi said it best. A man who needs approval has already lost his power. Because the more you chase external praise, the more you forget how to praise yourself. Addiction. Comfort. It starts small. You avoid a tough conversation, you skip a workout, you delay a decision, and then it grows, until you're living in a padded cage. Safe, but slowly shrinking. Musashi wrote, "Accept everything exactly as it is," not because he was passive, but because he knew. Pain is a teacher. Discomfort is where the brain grows, and ease is where strength dies. A neuroscientist once said, "The human mind builds new strength only under pressure. Modern men avoid pressure like the plague, and they wonder why they feel soft." Addiction. 3. Desire. This one's the deadliest. Musashi wrote, "Let go of desire." Not because desire is evil, but because being ruled by it makes you a slave. Think about it. How many men do you know who are ruled by impulse? The urge to consume, to react, to satisfy every craving instantly. They think they're free, but they're not living, they're reacting. True strength begins when you can say, "I feel this, but I choose something higher." Musashi didn't destroy men with brute force. He beat them before the sword was drawn, because he had already defeated what controlled them. So here's the question. What controls you? Because until you see the chains, you'll never break free, and breaking free, that's where the real transformation begins. Let's talk about how Musashi did it. Alone, in the wilderness, after his early victories, after he had already defeated dozens of warriors, Musashi did something strange. He disappeared. No parades, no riches, no celebration. Instead, he walked into the mountains, alone. He left behind every comfort. No women, no students, no followers, no noise. Why? Because he understood something most men never will. You don't find your strength in the crowd. You find it in the silence. Musashi believed that as long as a man is surrounded by comfort, praise, and distraction, he'll never meet the one person who matters most, himself. So he stripped everything away. He meditated in caves. He trained in cold rivers. He faced his fears not with a sword, but with stillness. And in that raw solitude, he began to hear the voices that most men spend their lives avoiding. The voice of doubt, the voice of fear, the voice of need. And instead of running, he listened. He wrestled. He overcame. This wasn't some romantic journey. It was brutal, lonely, uncomfortable. But Musashi wasn't seeking comfort. He was seeking truth. And here's what he found. A man only discovers his true strength when there is no one left to save him. Let that sink in. Because in today's world, most men are never alone. They're surrounded, yet disconnected, always stimulated, but never centered. When was the last time you sat in silence? No phone, no TV, no talking, just you? If that idea terrifies you, then maybe that's exactly where your strength is waiting. Musashi didn't fear solitude. He made it his ally, because solitude doesn't weaken a man. It reveals him, and what he discovered in that silence, it would lead him to the three demons every man must face. And you're about to meet them. Out there. In the cold, in the silence, in the stillness. Musashi met the real enemy. Not another swordsman, not a warlord, not a beast, but three voices, whispering from within. He called them demons, because they didn't just haunt his mind, they tried to control it, and whether you realize it or not, they're whispering to you too. Demon 1, the voice of doubt. You're not good enough. You'll fail. Who do you think you are? This voice doesn't yell. It creeps in, quiet, persistent, especially when you're tired, rejected, or starting something new. It convinces strong men to play small. It turns risk into paralysis. It kills dreams before they take a single breath. Musashi didn't silence this voice. He fought it, with repetition, with resolve, with relentless action, because the antidote to doubt is discipline. Demon 2, the voice of addiction. You need her. You need their praise. You can't live without this. This voice is seductive. It tells you that you're incomplete. That without someone or something, you are less of a man. It wraps dependency in the disguise of love, of comfort, of normalcy. But Musashi knew the truth. When you need anything outside of yourself to feel whole, you are not free. So he let it go. He let everything go, not to punish himself, but to purify himself. Demon 3, the voice of fear. What if you lose it all? What if you're alone forever? What if you die? Fear is the oldest demon, and it's the hardest to kill. Because fear isn't loud, it's convincing. It makes you settle. It makes you delay. It makes you survive, but never live. Musashi didn't eliminate fear. He went deeper. He made fear his training partner. Every day he visualized his own death. He imagined it with such clarity that he stopped fearing it. And when death no longer had power over him, nothing else did either. These demons didn't leave overnight. They clawed, they screamed, they begged. But Musashi stayed, alone, present, unmoved, and slowly they grew quiet. Because when a man stops running from his demons, he begins to lead them, and once that happens, something incredible awakens, a new strength, not loud, not boastful, but undeniable. In the next chapter, you'll witness the darkest and most brilliant ritual Musashi ever practiced, living death. Every morning as the sun rose over the mountains, Musashi performed a ritual, not a sword drill, not a prayer, not even meditation in the way we know it. He sat, closed his eyes, and imagined himself dying, not symbolically, not metaphorically. He saw the blade pierce his body. He felt the blood drain from his skin. He pictured his hands growing cold, his breath slowing, his eyes going dim, and then he opened them and went on with his day. Why would a man do this? Why would he replay his own death daily? Because Musashi had discovered the root of all fear, the fear of death. And he knew, if he could face that fear, truly face it, he would be untouchable. Think about it. How many choices in your life were made out of fear? Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of starting over, all of them whispers of the same ancient terror. I might lose something. I might lose everything. But Musashi flipped the script. By imagining his death, he made peace with the one thing no man can escape, and in doing so, he freed himself from the grip of every other fear. A modern psychologist once said, "The fear of death is the soil where all other fears grow." Musashi pulled that fear out by the roots. He didn't become reckless, he became fearless, and that is not the same thing. Fearless men don't rush into danger. They walk into life with clarity, because when death is no longer the enemy, life becomes a gift, not a gamble. Most men don't live. They endure, they protect, they postpone, waiting for the right moment, waiting to feel ready, waiting until it's safe. Musashi didn't wait, because once you've died in your mind, once you've buried your ego, your attachments, your illusions, what's left is real, unshakable, unstoppable, unbreakable. And when Musashi returned from that darkness, he wasn't just strong, he was reborn. And what he brought back with him would become the foundation for the 5 laws of inner power. Let's uncover them next. When Musashi emerged from solitude, he didn't come back as a man looking for war. He came back as a man who had conquered the battlefield within. And from that victory, he wrote down 5 laws, not to dominate others, but to master oneself. These were the codes he lived by until his final breath, and today they remain a blueprint for any man who seeks real strength. Law 1. Accept loneliness as your greatest teacher. Solitude isn't emptiness, it's refinement. Musashi discovered that when a man sits in silence without distraction or noise, he doesn't lose himself, he meets himself. The one who fears being alone, he wrote, is still dependent on the presence of others to feel whole. Most men chase connection to avoid silence, but true connection begins after you've stood alone. Law 2. Turn discomfort into fuel. Most avoid discomfort like a plague. Musashi sought it. He trained in storms. He slept in caves. He went hungry by choice, not to suffer, but to sharpen. Because when you lean into discomfort, you find out what you're really made of. And discomfort, unlike ease, never lies. Law 3. Kill your emotional needs. This one sounds harsh, but Musashi knew a man ruled by emotion is a man easily controlled. It doesn't mean being heartless. It means no longer needing praise to feel proud, no longer needing love to feel worthy, no longer needing agreement to feel right. The man who does not require, he said, can never be manipulated. Detach, and you rise. Law 4. Live as if you were already dead. This wasn't morbidity, it was clarity. When you accept death, you stop fearing rejection. You stop delaying purpose. You stop wasting time. Every moment becomes sharper, richer, real. Musashi didn't live recklessly. He lived fully. Because when there's nothing left to prove, you're finally free to live. Law 5. Master your impulses. Anger, lust, laziness, greed. Most men are ruled by urges they don't even notice. They call it being human. But Musashi saw that unchecked impulse is what separates a man from a beast. He trained himself to pause, to breathe, to choose, not react. That's power. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to not be dominated by yourself. These 5 laws weren't written for popularity. They weren't meant to sell books or gain followers. They were carved from fire, forged in silence, tested in blood, and they turned a warrior into a legend. But even they weren't the final test, because Musashi's greatest duel, the one that revealed everything, was yet to come. And you'll witness it next. His name was Sasaki Kojiro. They called him the Demon of the West. He was fast, he was brutal, and he was the only man believed to be strong enough to defeat Musashi. The duel was set. the beach, the blades, the legend. But Musashi didn't arrive on time. He arrived 3 hours late. Why? Because he understood something his opponent didn't. The battle always begins in the mind. While Kojiro waited, nervous, frustrated, pacing. Musashi was on a boat, calmly carving a wooden sword. By the time he stepped onto the sand, the duel was already over. Kojiro swung with fury. Musashi struck once, game over. But what happened after was even more powerful. Musashi never fought again. He had nothing left to prove, because true strength isn't about showing power. It's about knowing you don't need to. And now, it's your turn. No, not to fight duels, not to vanish into caves, but to ask a question that most men avoid until it's too late. Who am I without all the noise? Strip away the job title, the car, the social media, the approval, the comfort, the distractions. What's left? Because that is where your journey begins. You don't need a mountain. You don't need a sword. You just need to start, right here, right now. So if you're still watching, you're not like most men. Most checked out 5 minutes ago. You stayed. You listened. You felt something shift. That's not nothing. That's everything. Now make it real. In the comments, write just 4 words. I accept Musashi's challenge. Not for me, not for the algorithm, for you, because weak men seek comfort, strong men seek growth, and the path of strength is often walked alone. But if you walk it, you'll never feel empty again. You'll feel complete.